Hello, my spooky crew, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time here. My name is Alex, and thanks for coming to my spooky corner of the internet. Let's talk about the infamous Dybbuk Box. Yes, we are going to talk about the Dybbuk Box. This has been kind of a point of contention for me for several years, and mostly it's because I kind of got duped. Well, I did get duped. There's a lot surrounding the Dybbuk Box. There's a lot of controversy, whether you believe it's real or whether you believe it's a hoax. There are a lot of issues with the Dybbuk Box, and a lot of it is very problematic. So we're going to talk about that today. And also a disclaimer. I am not of the Jewish faith. And so I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to try to be very careful to not speak over the voices of the Jewish community who have spoken out about the Dybbuk Box. I do have links to references that have been created from those of Jewish descent. So I highly encourage you to check out those links, go to the direct sources, because I don't want to speak over the Jewish community. I want to be a good ally and a good advocate and support. So this means I'm not going to take a really deep dive into the folklore behind the Dybbuk, because it's not my place. So be sure to check the links in the description of this video. Sounds good? And before we get started, be sure to click on that subscribe button, give this video a like, and be sure to click on that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I upload a new video. And I also do premieres every Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, 7 p.m. And I also have a Patreon. For a few bucks per month, you can get a backstage look at the spooky stuff. I try to post bloopers, and as I'm getting back to my writing projects, you'll get a sneak peek at my books that are unedited so you can see how much of a hot mess of a writer I actually am. And also you can go to my website if you want more ghost hunting tips, spooky stories, and other paranormal goodies, then head on over to thespookystuff.com. All right, let's get started. Okay, first let's talk about the origin story of the Dybbuk Box. This all goes back to 2003. That was when the infamous eBay listing from Kevin Mannis came out. Please excuse me, I have to get my notes out. I've been doing a lot of notes on this whole thing because I wanted to get it right. According to the eBay listing, everything started in 2001. Kevin Mannis, the man who posted the eBay listing, was in possession of the box for about 2 years. And he claims that in 2001, he purchased the Dybbuk Box from an estate sale of a Holocaust survivor. And this was all in Portland, Oregon. The Holocaust survivor who owned the box, she passed away at age 103, so she had quite the long life. So the survivor's granddaughter was talking to Kevin and told her that her grandmother was the sole survivor of the Holocaust. She had grown up in Poland, she was married, and she had children. And then she was sent to a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. And she was the only member of her family who survived the concentration camp. And she survived because, according to the story, she escaped with a few other prisoners and went to Spain. And that was where she lived until the end of the war. And while this woman was in Spain, she acquired a small wine cabinet. And then when she immigrated to the United States, it was one of the only 3 items that she had brought with her. And the other 2 items, I think, were a trunk and a sewing box. And so when Kevin Mannis bought the Dybbuk Box, her granddaughter, the woman's granddaughter, came up to him and said, "Oh, I see you got the Dybbuk Box." And Kevin said, "Oh, what's a Dybbuk Box?" And the granddaughter said that the woman would always keep the Dybbuk Box in her sewing room, locked away, sealed away. And when the granddaughter would ask her grandmother what was inside, her grandmother would spit 3 times through her fingers and said, "A Dybbuk and keselim." And then the grandmother told her granddaughter that the wine cabinet was never to be opened. The grandmother actually wanted the box to be buried with her, but this went against Orthodox Jewish customs, so it was a no-go. And then Kevin said that he asked the granddaughter what a Dybbuk was and what keselim was, and apparently she did not know. And then Kevin asked the granddaughter if she wanted to open the box with him, and she was like, "Nope, nope." And then Kevin actually offered to the granddaughter and said, "Hey, do you just want to keep the box?" And she said, "No, you bought it. It's yours now." And he even said, like, "I don't even want my money back. You can just have the box," because apparently it's very sentimental. And the woman, apparently, the granddaughter, apparently turned around, looked at Kevin and said, "No, you bought it. You made a deal." Little weird, right? And again, he tried to give the box back, but it was just no, to the point where the granddaughter got visibly upset, so he let it go. Now, the reason why Kevin bought the Dybbuk Box, well, he was at the estate sale and bought these items, was because he owned an antique shop. It was like a small antique like furniture refining business, I think. And his plan was that he was going to refinish the Dybbuk box and give it to his mother. And he had left the box in his shop in the basement with the sales girl, and he went and stepped out. Apparently 30 minutes later, the sales girl called Kevin, hysterically crying, saying that there was someone in the basement. You could hear like glass crashing and breaking, and there was somebody swearing, and that the intruder had locked the security gate so that she couldn't get out. Kevin told the sales girl, hey, you need to call the police. Then his cell phone goes dead, and he rushes back to the shop. And when he got there, he saw the sales girl in the corner of the basement, sobbing hysterically, and she never came back. This is very much the abridged version of the story, by the way. And so Kevin decided, hey, while I'm here, let's open the Dybbuk box. And he found 2 pennies. One was a 1928 US wheat penny, and the other was a 1925 US wheat penny. There was a small lock of reddish brown hair tied with a white string, and a lock of black hair tied with another white string. And there was a small granite statue engraved with Hebrew letters, and that the Hebrew letters spelled out shalom. There was 1 dried rosebud, 1 wine cup, and then there was a black cast iron candlestick holder that had octopus legs. So those are the contents of the Dybbuk box. And then on the back of the box, there was carving with more Hebrew wording that we learned later spell out Shema, which is one of the most important prayers in Judaism. Instead of refinishing the Dybbuk box, Kevin decided to just, clean it up a little bit, and he gave it to his mother for her birthday. Within minutes of getting the Dybbuk box, his mother had a stroke. And while she was in the hospital, she wrote down, because that was all she could do, she could write, she said, no gift. Kevin thought that maybe she had forgotten that she had gotten a gift, and so she wrote another note that said, hate gift. So he was stuck with the box again. Then Kevin tried to give the box to his sister, but then she gave it back a week later because apparently the doors wouldn't close. And anytime she tried to close the doors, they kept opening up by themselves. And then he tried giving it to his brother and his wife, and they kept it for 3 days, but then they gave it back. His brother said that it smelled like jasmine flowers, while his wife said that it smelled like cat urine. Very different sense right there. Then he gave it to his girlfriend. Kevin gave it to his girlfriend, and then she gave it back after 2 days, but didn't say why. And then a middle-aged couple bought the box. They bought the box, and then 3 days later, Kevin found the box sitting outside, and there was a note on the box that said, there's a darkness to this box, or this box has a dark energy to it. And then Kevin talked about how he was having some really disturbing dreams. Like in the dream, he would be walking with someone or talking to someone that he knew, but then that person would transform into a hag and start attacking him and beating him. So Kevin had his siblings and their spouses over, and apparently the gathering had ended late, so they all stayed the night, and his sister mentioned that she had this terrible nightmare. And it was also the same dream that Kevin had, with the hag beating the living daylights out of them. And it turns out that Kevin's brother and his wife also had the same dream. And then Kevin called his girlfriend and asked her if she had been having any disturbing dreams lately, and it turns out she had had the same dream as well. Walking with someone that they knew, that person would transform into this hideous hag, and that hag would start attacking them. And then Kevin started talking about in the eBay listing about how he was seeing shadows out of the corner of his eye. He would start smelling really bad smells like jasmine and cat urine, smoke alarms going off, just running into a string of bad luck. So that's the eBay listing. You can still find it on the internet, I'm pretty sure. I recommend reading it in its full entirety with all of the nitty-gritty details, but to sum it all up and to make this succinct, Kevin was running into a lot of bad luck. We had the dreams, the shadows. Kevin was running into issues with his eyes. His mother had the stroke. Apparently Kevin was also the victim of an invasion from the FBI and local police that apparently happened on the same day that his mother had the stroke, and oh my gosh, it's a hot mess. But anyway, Kevin puts the box on eBay. A man named Joseph Nietzsche ends up buying the box. Joseph is a student at Truman State University at this time, and his roommate actually worked for Jason Haxton at the museum. I think it was a medical museum or some sort of medical specialty museum at Truman State University. So that was Jason Haxton's starting the connection with the Dybbuk box. And so Yosef buys the box, runs into very similar situations. And by the way, the box was purchased as as like an experiment. But he also runs into like smelling cat urine, sometimes smelling jasmine, seeing shadows, having nightmares, issues with his eyes, and also his hair falling out. That was a big one that was happening as well. And so things got bad, but they were also using the Dybbuk box as like a flirtation device too, according to Jason Haxton's book. Like, they would get like girls to go into the room where the Dybbuk box was, make them touch it, but not tell them what it was. And then it's like, oh, hey, you're cursed now. You know, because that's how you get girls' attention. I do recommend reading this book, especially after you know the full story of like the Dybbuk box lore and everything. Let's just say it's very eye-opening when you know the whole story and then you read this book. It's a very interesting experience. So anyway, the box, so Jason's trying to get the box because he's really fascinated with it. This is his specialty. He's an academic. He knows like history, anthropology, cultural lore and everything. He's very smart, but he doesn't get the box directly from Yosef or the roommate, his employee. The box gets put back onto eBay. And so Jason Haxton bids on it on eBay. He gets the box and, he runs into very similar situations as well. Just this string of bad luck with, his eyes got like bloodshot red, seeing shadows, seeing like light trails and everything in his home. And he also lives in an old Victorian home as well that's like over 100 years old, smelling jasmine, cat urine around different parts of his house. It was interesting. And also, like, there's a string of unalivings associated with the box too. We have to rewind back to when the box was with Kevin Mannis. Apparently, the brother of one of Kevin's employees just randomly shows up one day and is like, oh, I need to talk to my brother. Well, he doesn't even say that it's his brother. Oh, the employee's name was Shorty. Okay, so the guy comes in, he's looking for Shorty, and as he's trying to like move around the shop looking for Shorty, he tries to go down into the basement. Kevin's like, hey buddy, you can't go down there. He accidentally knocks over the Dybbuk box, and then he makes a very anti-Semitic, Nazi salute, which is awful. And that was when Kevin like calls the cops. The cops arrest the guy. Turns out the guy is Shorty's brother, and the brother had just gotten out of prison like the day of or the day before. But then the next day or a couple days later, it's discovered that Shorty unalived himself just a few blocks away from the shop. Could have been coincidence, after knocking over the Dybbuk box, then Shorty's brother unalives himself. And then eventually Shorty and his mom pass away as well. But again, connecting that to the Dybbuk box is a far reach. And then there was also another person who unalived themselves associated with Jason. When this person was found passed, the box was like above him, like sitting on a shelf above him. Yeah, so there's a lot of things happening here, but the box ended up staying in Jason's possession. In the book, he uses, first he tries to do like an appeasement ritual. It doesn't really work. Then he does like a Wiccan-esque cleansing, which ends up being, I guess, effective. But all in all, he ends up putting the box in a military-grade box and then basically burying it on his property. And then of course we know that the Dybbuk box makes its way to Zach Bagans, and that's where we have, the Post Malone situation where Post Malone believes that he got cursed by the Dybbuk box, and Zach really, riding the Dybbuk box train, so to speak. And then, of course, we know the movie, The Possession, which came out in 2012. There have been countless documentaries and other books, as well as other Dybbuk boxes popping up on eBay and Etsy. Etsy's the interesting one. But the whole origin lore of the Dybbuk box also goes in deeper. The original woman who, created the Dybbuk box, her name was Havila. Again, staying consistent with the story, she grew up and lived in Poland, had a family and everything. So Havila, during this time, pre-World War II, 1940s, late 1930s, early 1940s, it was fashionable to have seances. And so apparently Havila was the one who was hosting like these seances. And then Havila and her group ended up finding like a spiritual guide to kind of help them through like the growing anti-Semitism that was happening with the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler and whatnot. And so the spiritual guide was the Dybbuk. And so these women would have regular meetings with the spirits. And then these women wanted these spirits to come into the physical world. And Kevin noted that the date was, they met on November 8th in the evening, and the spirits apparently came into our physical world on November 9th, 1938. Now, if you know your World War II history, that is Kristallnacht. It was the beginning of Kristallnacht. So the women were planning to trap this spirit, and then the spirits were released and the Holocaust happened. You're probably seeing how problematic this story is, by the way. And so these women ended up trapping the Dybbuk into this box, but apparently the original Dybbuk box was destroyed when Havala was trying to transport the box to either the concentration camp and whatnot. Again, if you know World War II history, there's blaring inconsistencies here. But anyway, there's a lot here. I'm going to get into the problematic elements of the story in a little bit, but I'm going to say something pretty startling. Kevin Mannis completely made up the origin story for the Dybbuk box. Now, we got a first hint of this in 2015. In 2015, October 24th, 2015, Kevin Mannis had posted this in the Haunt Me Facebook group. He said, I have to call bullshit on the episode Haunt Me did at Mexico High School with the supposed Dybbuk box. The setup and definition of a Dybbuk box was entirely false and erroneous, and the claim that the box being something, also a so-called fifth level demon, was also a bunch of hogwash. I am uniquely qualified to make these claims as I am the original creator of the story of the Dybbuk box, which appeared as one of my eBay posts back in 2003. The idea that Dybbuk boxes have some kind of history prior to my story, and the idea that a Dybbuk box could contain anything other than a Dybbuk, along with any deviation to the type of contents I created to be found inside of a Dybbuk box, is laughable at best. How about this? If you or anyone else can find any reference to a Dybbuk box anywhere in history prior to my eBay post, I'll pay you $100,000 and tattoo your name on my forehead. Bottom line, I applaud your reference to my work, but use your own creativity to come up with something for your own show and leave my practice of Kabbalah and my intellectual property alone. Oh my gosh. So there you have it. So Kevin Mannis completely made up the origin story of the Dybbuk box. So what's also interesting about this is Kevin is also Jewish. Now, before Kevin really came, well, actually before and after Kevin came out with this Facebook confession, there have been multiple people who have called out the story of the Dybbuk box. Kenny Biddle actually found the patent for the wine cabinet. It's the original patent. I think it goes back to like the 1950s, late 1950s, early 1960s. To be fair, Jason also picked this up in his, as he noted in his book, but it's not a Spanish wine box. It is a mini bar. So it's not even like what is said to be. And Kevin also confessed that all of the items that were inside the Dybbuk box were created by him. So the hair was from a couple of his friends and he made the granite statue, and he was the one who carved Shema on the back of the box. So the wine, I think it was the wine cup or the actually it is the wine cup. Apparently that holds boiled eggs. So the chalice is actually like a little egg holder. Kenny Biddle and Kevin Mannis and Charles Moss actually got together for Kenny's show, Skeptical Help Bar, and they dove into this. So Charles had written an article called Finally, the Truth Behind the Haunted Dybbuk Box Can Be Revealed for a website called Input Mag. I think it is an actual magazine, but you know, the article's online. And he dives into this. So, you know, we had the Facebook post, but then Charles actually does like the full out expose on this. So knowing now that Kevin made up the story, what does that say for Yosef Nietzsche and Jason Haxton? So let's talk about what a Dybbuk actually is. Now, I'm only going to really glaze over this because this isn't my culture, this isn't my heritage, and I don't want to speak over members of the Jewish community who have spoken about this. So I highly recommend going and checking out the Jewwitch's blog and podcast. She also has a TikTok account where she does a deeper dive into the legends and lore behind the Dybbuk. Now, a Dybbuk is a spirit, but it's more, I guess you could say it's more like a ghost. It's not a demon. A Dybbuk is not a demon. Also, Dybbuks are spirits of people who passed on without remorse. So they didn't go through, the process of getting remorse or forgiveness for their sins. So they're kind of stuck in limbo. So they don't cross over to the other side. They don't go either way. They're just kind of lingering. So it's a clinging or a possessing spirit. This process of repentance is known as teshuva. Again, go to jewwitches.com. You can actually find a lot more information about this. The spirit hasn't gone through teshuva. They haven't gotten forgiveness for what they've done. They haven't even really said sorry. And so these spirits can have a multitude of things going on. So that spirit may fear judgment since they didn't go through teshuva and didn't ask for forgiveness and whatnot. And again, I can't speak on Judaism and their beliefs on what happens after death. That's a whole other conversation. Once this spirit is unable or unwilling to perform teshuva, they basically become a dibbukim and they have to seek a host. And it's because they can't exist without a body. So they have to find people to possess. G-Witches also made a note that there has been a case where there's been a Dybbuk possession of a cat and also another animal. And what's interesting is that the spirits, the Dybbuk themselves, come from men, and the ones that are possessed have been more often women. That's an interesting note. And I noticed there was a movie that came out in the 1930s called The Dybbuk, which, again, there's no box involved, but it's more aligned with the actual definition of a Dybbuk or a dibbukim. So on that note, what we know of as a Dybbuk box is fake. It is not real. And also, unfortunately, there is a strong presence of anti-Semitism in the paranormal community as they try to defend the Dybbuk box, which honestly is frankly disgusting. For almost 20 years now, people from the Jewish community have been speaking out about how this box isn't real, and they're met with some horrible anti-Semitism. I don't understand when somebody from that community and from that culture says, hey, this is incorrect, this is wrong. Why is it that they get so much pushback? And I've noticed in later coverings of the Dybbuk box by Zach, he seems to have omitted the word demon from the Dybbuk box lore, and he just says evil spirit. But, these days, evil spirit equals demon in the paranormal world. So there are thousands of Dybbuk boxes online that have anti-Semitic tropes. You'll find them all over the place, and even Kevin comments about these fake boxes on Etsy and eBay, and they're just no, this isn't the case. And also, there was a point where Jason Haxton accused Kevin of creating the Dybbuk box using Kabbalah, which, okay. Also, the origin story with the Dybbuk box, with Havilah and her community of women bringing in the Dybbuk into this world, and then the Holocaust happened and everything. So there's a long line of people blaming the Jewish community for the misfortunes of the whole extension story of the Dybbuk box is extremely problematic. But what's also interesting is that I've read that Jason Haxton has claimed to have found the original family who created the Dybbuk box, and Kevin's sitting here thinking well, that's impossible because I made the whole thing up. Yeah, the Dybbuk box thing is problematic on a multitude of levels. But if the Dybbuk box is fake, then why has there been so many paranormal and supernatural happenings surrounding the Dybbuk? We're always looking for something or someone to blame when it comes to misfortunes in our lives. And of course, with the whole issues with their eyes, Kevin had issues with his eyes, as well as Jason Haxton also had issues with his eyes. And of course, people have noted that Zach Baggins has also had issues with his eyes, but I think that was more blamed on the demon house in Indiana. Anyway, they also had issues with their sewage system. And then, of course, we have Post Malone and his bad luck. Honestly, this is my personal opinion. I think that it was all just coincidence. Now, if I was to pinpoint a supernatural thing with this, I would say this is almost like an egregore or a thought form that was created. When you perpetuate a story like this for so long, we're coming up on almost 20 years here. You know, you have millions of people who know what a Dybbuk box is, and they have fed energy into this story so that now it kind of has a haunting of its own, but it's not a Dybbuk. It's not a Dybbuk. It doesn't align with Jewish folklore and culture. I mean, honestly, if the box is haunted, we need to reconsider a name change for it, because it's not a Dybbuk. Like the haunted wine box, I don't know. It's troubling. It's troubling that, you know, so many people from the Jewish community who have spoken out have encountered anti-Semitism and a lot of harassment for speaking out. And I've never understood the idol worship of paranormal celebrities and paranormal creators like on TikTok and YouTube who have amassed a large following, but they continue this problematic narrative. The narrative needs to stop, or at the very least, it needs to change. It completely needs to change. That's my thoughts on the Dybbuk box and the research. I highly recommend looking at the links that I put in the description. Do your research, take a deeper dive. It's gonna take a while because I think I researched this for a couple months now because I wanted to do it right. I don't know if I did it right. But, you know, get Jason Haxton's book. The book is interesting. He kind of does go back and forth between like believing it and not believing it and finding plot holes in the stories. Take a look at the video of Kenny Biddle, Charles Moss, and Kevin Mannis as they talk about the Dybbuk box hoax. Check out Jew Witches. There's so much information out there. You're gonna have a very interesting time diving in. So before you go, don't forget to click on the subscribe button and give this video a like, and feel free to share this video with your friends and family who enjoy the spooky stuff and also have thoughts about the Dybbuk box. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next round.